Shots fired. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez posted a fiery video to her Instagram account on Sunday, blasting Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein. Take a look.
And can't pursue any successful strategy, and all you do is show up once every 4 years to speak to people who are justifiably pissed off, but you're just showing up once every 4 years to do that. You're not serious. You're not to me, it does not read as authentic. It reads as predatory.
Congresswoman hit Jill Stein's multiple unsuccessful presidential runs and the struggles to grow the third party, the Green Party, at the grassroots level. Democrats have, in many cases, deemed Jill Stein a spoiler candidate, and including the reason Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump in 2016. A new survey by the Council on American Islamic Relations found that Muslim voters, in particular, evenly split right now between Jill Stein and Kamala Harris, possibly setting up Democrats to make the same argument. But joining us now to discuss is Jill Stein herself, the Green Party candidate. Welcome back to Rising.
Great to be with you, Ravi, Jessica. Good to see you.
Great to see you as well. We really appreciate your time. What did you make of AOC, someone who describes or has been described as a very progressive Democrat, nevertheless attacking the candidate, the most left-leaning candidate in the race?
I think it's pretty funny. Talk about authentic, reclining on her sofa and, providing this very kind of concocted argument. Clearly, she was set up as the attack dog of the day. Clearly, they are very worried because, American voters are in a state of rebellion, and our campaign is the one anti-genocide, anti-war, climate emergency, pro-worker campaign, which is turning out to be on the ballot now across the country. The Democrats have not succeeded in their extremely predatory tactics of silencing political opposition, silencing voters, denying voters the choices that they are clamoring for. She just kind of makes a mockery of the anti-democratic party in pretty much her whole message and the way that it was delivered. So I think she really did us a great favor and only draws more attention to the flailing of the Democratic Party right now, whose base is very much up in arms. And the one other thing I want to add is that if there's anything predatory here, the height of predatory is conducting a genocide and trying to, manipulate voters into thinking that Kamala Harris is working, diligently day and night for a ceasefire. This is absolutely not true. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have the power to shut down this genocide in the blink of an eye, and they are not they are not interested and have said as much. They're not going to do it. And the American voters know that and are in an uprising right now as we speak.
And so there were a few false statements that AOC made. And as someone who grew up working class in the tri-state area, at one point I looked up to AOC. I was a bartender. I used it to pay my bills. Then I found out she had a publishing company while she was a bartender. And then I found out she actually went to high school in Yorktown in northern Westchester County, which is a much better school than the schools they've got in the Bronx. And so listening to her say that the Greens have run you for president over and over consecutively is just flat out wrong, because anyone who pays attention to the Greens would know that in 2020 it was Howie Hawkins who was running at the national level with the Greens, and that not only do you run candidates at the local level, the Greens have candidates in Minnesota and Arkansas and Wisconsin, in a lot of states that we don't see progressive organizations really investing in right now. So can you just speak to a little bit of that attack and how there were inaccuracies in it?
Yes, I mean, that attack was predatory. That attack was entirely false. The Greens have elected some 1,400 candidates over the past 15, 20 years, largely to local office. We have school committee members and, members of boards of selectmen and mayors, in fact, and the Greens are leading the charge in many ways. And it's so funny that she's saying, describing our runs as unsuccessful, yet she ran on our signature issue in a predatory fashion without acknowledging where she got her Green New Deal from. She launched it in 2018. We had launched it in 2010. And, there she was standing there as if she had come up with this, invented it out of whole cloth. So, there's plenty of predatory there. We basically launched the progressive agenda, starting with single payer, which Ralph Nader ran on in 2000 as a Green, calling for free public higher education and a bailout for students in debt, for reparations against, for enslaved people to repay an outstanding debt, a huge debt. All of these things she and much of the Democratic Party have given lip service to, which have really come from the Greens. So we have totally transformed, the political agenda. And when she says we're, ineffective compared to what, given the tactics of largely the Democratic Party to silence political opposition, non-corporate campaigns and parties generally last less than 10 years at a national level. So you can look at, for example, Peace and Freedom Party, which at one point had ballot access across the country, maybe 25, 30 states at one time. They've been knocked back to 2. The socialist parties now run candidates for city council here and there. The Greens have actually been enormously successful compared to all the other non-corporate parties. And one other thing, when she says, that she knows about third parties because she's run with working families. Well, unfortunately, with all due respect, the Working Families Party is not really a third party. They are a second ballot line for Democrats, and they work hand in glove with the Democratic Party. If you claim to be an alternative party, or a third party, you don't know what that means unless you're under attack by the Democrats, because that is basically the major characteristic of running as an alternative, is that you have to put up with the dirty tricks, the fraud, and the abuse committed by the anti-Democratic Party.
Now, Dr. Stein, I like that you pointed out, sorry, I want to jump in here and make sure we get to this. When you had just pointed out that AOC at the DNC, in her speech, she said that Kamala Harris is working tirelessly for a ceasefire. Ilhan Omar, fellow squad member, hit back. She was at a rally and she said, the way you have a ceasefire is you stop sending the weapons. She can do that today. Just stop sending the weapons. And Palestinian American and representative at the state level in Georgia, Ruwa Roman, was meant to speak at the DNC. The DNC sort of ended this last minute. Everyone was hoping a Palestinian American would speak who's in this movement for peace in Gaza. She posted, real talk, do political operatives know that Arabs show up as white in census data? And also in a lot of campaign data, I share this because in 3 of the top 5 swing state House races in Georgia, Arab voters are anywhere from 1 to 3 times the margin of victory. Georgia's a key state for the Democrats. And not that Arabs and Muslims are all the same, but there is overlap. Seeing that you're polling, getting half of the Muslim vote compared to Kamala Harris getting the other half, how does that make you feel? It seems that there are a lot of these voters that really see you as the candidate that recognizes the situation in Gaza at this pivotal moment.
Well, I have to say that the genocide in Gaza has really been a central issue from us from the very start, and we had a candidate, you may recall, Cornel West was going to be the candidate for the Green Party. And when he parted ways, for totally understandable reasons, it's hard to join a party for the first time when you're running as its presidential candidate, so that be that as it may, when he parted ways, we had very little time. And I was compelled and arm twisted to jump into the race very much because we had ballot lines and we knew that we could provide an alternative, a place for Americans who, by huge numbers, not only oppose the genocide, but support a weapons boycott in order to achieve that ceasefire and put an end to this horror, this daily massacre that we witness. So the genocide was very much a motivator for me to jump into the race and to be sure that our ballot lines would not go to waste, because there are other progressive, wonderful voices out there, but they don't have the ballot lines in order to truly challenge empire and to challenge genocide. So, I take it very much as a Jew who grew up after the Holocaust, shortly after the Second World War, in a Jewish synagogue. For me, it was really essential in coming to terms with genocide to affirm, to absolutely, incorporate into my DNA as a human being that genocide won't happen again. We won't let that happen. And that means not perpetrate genocide and not be a bystander to genocide. And right now, our country is doing both. We are a perpetrator and we are a bystander. And I think it's so critical. It really is a moral imperative of the moment that we not be talked into holding our noses and voting on behalf of genocide. And I'm so, really grateful to the Arab American and the Muslim communities who are living this, up close and personal, who are taking the genocide, really within their own families, that they are increasingly discovering and supporting our campaign. And I think all bets are off about where this goes. And it's really important. The genocide is not just a crisis of this moment. It really is a crisis of empire and the state of American foreign policy, which needs to change. It absolutely must change. And we pay a devastating price for that here at home in terms of, half of our congressional budget, so that we can't pay for the healthcare and the housing and the education and the climate action that we urgently need. So I really see it as a central and very unifying issue. And I'm really gratified that so much of America is discovering that we actually are the alternative that they have been clamoring for.
Just very quickly, because we're running out of time here, you've used the phrase anti-Democratic Party a couple times. We've reported on the show of, for instance, efforts the Democratic Party made to, recruit activists to try to disqualify RFK Jr. from the ballot. Consequently, he's no longer in the race and has endorsed Donald Trump. I think there's something, there's a be careful, of getting what you wish for, just in terms of the politics and the tactics of what the Democratic Party did. But obviously it goes beyond that, because it's in their name. And is what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden before her made the most fundamental issue of this election, is the preservation of democracy itself. So what does it say when they take actual efforts to disqualify rival candidates and then rhetorically, like AOC does, try to say that, well, third parties, they're not viable, you have to stick with the Democrats? Well, if they're not viable, why aren't they viable? Because you're part of a two-party system that helps to keep it not viable.
Exactly. And, the most disastrous election outcome that they've had in modern times is the 2010 election, where they lost 1,000 seats in state legislatures, 64 in Congress, some 13 in the Senate, and the same number of governor seats, not because of a third party, but because they had just bailed out Wall Street to the tune of trillions while throwing out millions upon millions of homeowners from their homes. And before that, it was NAFTA and the Clintons, so the Democrats have lost their own base, and their effort to silence competition, is outrageous. And they not only, hired an army of lawyers to throw us off the ballot, and they challenged us in 3 states, but we've beaten them back. I think we're going to prevail in all 3 states. They publicly advertised for infiltrators and spies to disrupt our party and our projects, getting on the ballot. And they also hung on to our public matching funds and basically hijacked that money also to keep us off the ballot. So, the Democrats have really made a mockery out of themselves. They are not the servants of democracy. And when they rail about Donald Trump as the essence of fascism, we don't have to wait for Donald Trump. We're seeing fascism right now roll out in our communities, with cop cities and police that are being trained by the Israeli Defense Forces, who are cracking the heads of anti-war, anti-genocide protesters who are just expressing what the American people themselves feel. So I think the Democrats continue to marginalize themselves. Before AOC, it was actually Jamie Harrison who tried to smear us on social media and made an utter fool of himself in doing so. So I say, bring it on. Keep throwing us into the briar patch, because, it speaks volumes, and, it really helps the American people understand what the nature of their choices are right now.
Well said, Dr. Stein. Appreciate you sharing your perspective on all of this. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much. Oh, and if I can add, it's jillstein2024.com. And I encourage people to come and join the team because it's definitely not over and you don't need to drink the Kool-Aid. Thanks so much.